So now that we implemented auto logout when our token expires, and no worries, we'll turn our heads towards adjusting the layout depending on the authentication state later too. Now that we get the auto logout implemented, let's turn our heads towards using that token to make requests to protected resources. That's of course a typical use case. You have a backend with certain API endpoints which should only be usable by authenticated users. Right now in our demo backend with Firebase, that's not the case though. If we have a look at the database, which gives us our endpoints in the end, all the endpoints, so all requests being sent to that URL and then any nodes nested beyond that, are basically available to everyone. That is the case because earlier in the course, we changed our rules here to grant read and write access to everyone here by setting this to true. We did this to be able to use that database without having authentication. Well, now we got authentication, so we can finally change this back. Now, of course, this is Firebase specific, that you do it with this rules setup. For your own backend, where you write your own API code, you probably have some if check, where you check if some valid token is attached to the request, and you simply return a 403 answer if that's not the case. Here, however, we do have these rules. And in the simplest case, we can set this to auth unequal null, which simply means if auth is not equal to null, then read access is granted. Put in other words, that means if you're not authenticated, then auth is null, therefore this returns false and you don't get read access. The same can be done for write access. If we set it up like this, this is applied to the entire database, to all the data that's in there. Now actually, I want to give access to ingredients for everyone and just make access to orders only available to authenticated users. So for Firebase, what we can do is we can fine tune our rules and we can say, yeah, in general, you got read and write access, but then we can add a rule here, nest this, and say for the orders node, and you have to name it exactly as the node is named, there I have a specific set of rules. There, read access is granted only if auth is unequal to null, so if you are authenticated, and the same for write access. That should also only be granted if it's unequal to null. So with that, we can publish these rules, and that will now ensure that we do indeed only grant write and read access to the ingredients to everyone, but not to the orders. However, if we do it like this, our top level read and write rules would still override this for any nested nodes. So I actually have to get rid of that, and instead I'll add a separate rule here for my ingredients. And there I'll still set read and write to true, but that means that only the ingredients now have read and write access, or are open to everyone, I should say. Orders is only available to authenticated users. And I should add a comma here after the curly brace of ingredients. With that, we can test it. If I go back to my application, reload it, and go to orders, we get an error. If I go to the burger builder though, that still works. So the ingredients were still loaded. I only get an unauthorized error if I visit orders here. Now that is good. That is exactly what I want. And with that, we can now make sure that we can still reach orders if we are authenticated and have a token. To do that, I need to go to the place where we actually sent this orders request. And that of course is in the action creators in the orders file, in the actions folder. There we have the purchase burger action, and we also have the fetch orders action. Let's work on this one first. Here we essentially have to add our token we got back from Firebase when authenticating. And then we can attach this token to this request. The authentication is very simple then. We just have to add a query param, auth equals, to the URL we're making the request to, which requires a token. And then we have to pass the token. Now the token, of course, here is the special thing. The token is stored in our Redux store. How do we get it here inside our fetch orders action creator? Of course, we could receive get state. You learned about this. You can not only get your dispatch action, you can also get the get state function here, which you can execute to get access to the state. I also taught you that I'm not recommending using that a lot, and I don't want to use it here, though I see that this could be a case where it makes sense to get this information, which doesn't really matter to your view, right in the action creator. Still, I want to get it in the place where we dispatch the fetch orders action and then simply pass it as an argument to this action creator. So I expect to get a token argument in this function, and then I attach the token here to my request. So the missing piece is to make sure that we receive the token here when dispatching fetch orders. Fetch orders is of course dispatched in my orders container. There at the bottom we have on fetch orders. And here again I now need to pass on some token. So this token will have to be passed to this anonymous function we execute here and then passed on to the action creator. So finally we have to get the token in the place where we call onFetchOrders. OnFetchOrders is called here in the component didMount method, and now we need to make sure that we have the token when we call that. Now the token, as I said, is stored in our Redux store, of course. We store it in our auth state slice. Here, the token. So all we need to do is, in our orders container, where we already have map state to props, I now also need to get the token from my state. So I'll name the prop token, and I want to access state, and now not .order, because I'm not interested in the order related slice of my state. Instead, if we have a look at the index.js file where we combine the reducers, the auth reducer, which sets up the state for the token, the auth reducer can be found on an auth property. So this is what we should access. So in orders, I should access state auth token like this. And now with that, we're making the token available on the token prop. I can now simply pass this on here with this props token. And I will emphasize that this is only one way of doing it. The alternative would have been to use getState in the order action creator. With that though, we should get the token and pass it on here. So now if we save all our code and go back, it will still fail here because obviously when the app reloads, all tokens are lost. So let's switch to sign in and quickly sign in with the user we created a while ago. Hit submit. Now we can verify on Redux that we have a successful authentication and that in the auth stake we have a token. Let's now head over to orders, and as you can see, we now successfully load the orders here again without an error. This error here on the right is an old one, because now we successfully sent a request with the token attached. And you can actually see this if you open the network tab in your browser DevTools. There you can see that if I go back to orders again, here's the request being sent where the token is attached. This is the very long URL, but because the token is part of the URL, that is how we have to authenticate and how we can send our token to the backend. So this is now how we can use the token to access protected resources. Of course, the same is relevant when we make an order. Here, purchase burger. There we also need to get that token as an argument in the action creator and then add it as a query param to the URL we're sending the request to. So auth also should use the token here, or the auth query param should be the token argument we're receiving here. And for that, we of course have to make sure that we do receive the token here too. So we have to go to the place where we dispatch purchase burger, and that of course happens in contact data. There we got our method for making an order, the order handler, where we have on order burger, which in the end dispatches this action creator. So there, purchase burger is dispatched. Now here we need to pass that token. For that we need to receive it in our list of arguments of this method we're mapping in the prop. And for that we need to make the token available as a prop in that container too. So just as in the orders container, I'll map a token property to state of token. And now we can go to the place where we do dispatch this, where we call the prop dispatching the action on order burger, and also pass on this props token here. And with that, we're making sure that we are having a token and sending it. Now here we get an error because the application reloaded, hence the token is lost. But if I do sign in again, and we'll take care about this auto log out we're having here soon. If I log in again, I go to burger builder. If I now build a burger here, order now, continue. Let me clear the network tab. Continue here too. And now let's quickly enter some data like this. If I now click order here, you see that was successful because it sends the orders request. And don't be confused by two requests being sent here. The first one is just the options request, which Chrome always sends if you're sending a post request. This is the relevant one, this post request with the token. And indeed, we can verify in our database that we got a new order here with the burger we just configured. So this is now working. Now we're using that token to reach protected resources. And as you can see, when you reload the app and visit orders, for example, it's not working if you don't have a token. Of course, it's not the greatest user experience to, well, just visit a page and then fail. It would be better if we can't visit pages where we need to be authenticated in the first place. Of course, it would also be better if the UI would show us if we are authenticated. And it would be best if we could also log the user in if there theoretically still is a valid token, so that we don't lose our authentication state whenever we reload the application. These are all things we're going to tackle over the next lectures.